Hi. Um, oh, I'm totally blanking. Oh man. We're going to talk today about if you've ever noticed that or been worried about your teen's relationship, whether or not it's looking like a healthy relationship, and whether you're noticing signs of things that might be troubling or might be signaling trouble down the road. I'm Penny with Family and Community Support Services, and this is Amanda.
Hi, everybody. So, in recognition of Family Violence Prevention Month, which is November, we are going to continue the conversation with how family violence or domestic violence can affect our kids. And today we're going to focus a little bit on the circle of control as well as signs and symptoms that you can look for with your teens if they're in a bit of an abusive relationship of any sort, whether that be boyfriend, girlfriend, or a friendship, even because those definitely play a part as well. So I'm going to start by saying, as parents, we need to try and keep the lines of communication open. And I think if you've listened to any of our other discussions, that's always kind of at the front of the list, because if we don't keep those conversations going with our kids, if we aren't the safe person that they feel like they can talk to, then who are they going to talk to? And more times than not, they're going to then talk to their friends. And those aren't always the most reliable keeper of secrets or people that you can trust, because things get said in the heat of the moment, or their peers don't necessarily understand how big the picture is. And so my recommendation, definitely keep those lines of communication open. And by doing so, when your kids start testing the waters a little bit about wanting to tell you things, because they're going to, it's going to be small things here and there, right? My friend did this, and they're going to wait and see what your reaction is. And if your reaction is, fear-based or hammer hard or whatnot, they're going to hear it. They're going to just be like, "Yep, nope, I can't talk to this person. I can't talk to my mom or my dad or my trusted adult at this point because it's not safe." And so yeah, so keeping that in mind, some of the signs and symptoms that we can look for um within our teens and tweens is change in moods or personalities. And I say that with, the best possible situation, because as we know, all of our tweens and teens go through mood changes up and down throughout the entire day. But I'm talking about extreme changes. So if you're seeing difference, if you're seeing, your kids to be quick to snip, or say no, or get defensive when they normally wouldn't do that, that's definitely a sign that something at least is going on for them, whatever that looks like. Um, Another one that we probably all see with our teens and their technology is hiding them from us, right? And so their phones, if you're watching TV on the couch and they've got their phone and they kind of turn it away from you just even slightly, as for you not to see it is their intention, we need to be watching for that as well. Always being on their phone, and not necessarily allowing you to look at it. And that could go for not just phones but computers as well. And they're watching YouTube videos now and TikToks, and there's so many different apps out there that can house so much information for our kids. And we need to be checking them on the regular, as well as getting their passwords. And I know some parents will disagree with me, and that's totally fine, because we all do things a little bit differently. But based on, brain science and just the human being development, having our kids' passwords are very important. And periodic checks, right? I'm going to check your phone at some point, right? And I know we need to get a little bit more savvy on that for sure. So watching for that second one is watching for that technology hiding a little bit. Lack of motivation. So if you have a kid who is gung ho to go to school all the time, who's out with their friends, are doing all these things, and all of a sudden they're like, nope, I'm not leaving my house. They're, not necessarily utilizing technology as much. They don't want to go to school. Those kind of things, we need to watch for that as well. That could come from being in a controlling situation where, or a manipulating situation, or like a friendship problem for sure. And then finally, a big one is that change in friends, right? So are they maybe swaying to a different group than they normally would have friends, or are their friend groups getting smaller? Are they spending way more time with one person than the other, and you're seeing these other symptoms occur? So there's obviously lots more signs and symptoms that we can look at, and we'll probably touch on a few more as the month goes on. But those are the main ones that I wanted to share with all of you, parents who have teens and tweens. It is a situation, and so if we flip to peer pressure, we all know that word. We all, hammer that into the ground with our kids right from the get go. Peer pressure, peer pressure. Well, if you think about, I'm going to do a metaphor because I love metaphors. If you think about when you're cooking crabs and you've got a big crab pot and you put them all into the water, the first reaction that the crabs have is to try and climb out the pot. And the way they'll do that is to climb on top of one another. And so there's like this tower of crabs trying to get to the top. And they're not really getting anywhere, right? But they're utilizing each other for their own safety, for their own coping strategy, right? And so our kids, our teens, our tweens are like that as well. They're gonna start, if they feel like they're being threatened, they're gonna start throwing people under the bus, as we say, or they're gonna be climbing on the other crabs to get out of the pot. So peer pressure, those kind of things are normal to an extent. And as parents, again, or guardians, we need to be checking in with our kids, our teens, our tweens about those challenges that they're having. If, they can't trust somebody, or if somebody said something about this or whatnot. So.
And I think what you said earlier about it not just being, a romantic relationship, but that when my daughter started into middle school, and even before that a little bit, noticing things about friends that might be a little more controlling, like, you can only be friends with me and you can't be, and that's not, a physically abusive situation, but when you use the word controlling, when someone becomes very controlling, that's a bit of a warning sign too, that because it happens in both romantic and friendships. Yeah, so I think that's an important point to remember, that it can come from both sides.
Absolutely. And friends in that middle school stage, friends become the most important thing according to our tweens and our teens, right? It's their life, it's everything that they have. And so of course that they're going to do things that maybe they wouldn't normally do to impress that person or whatnot. And yes, definitely we can be applying and should be applying this to friendships as well. There's no case about that for sure. So, Penny, you touched a little bit on just, not necessarily physical abuse, but the other two that I want to mention besides the physical abuse is that verbal abuse and that emotional abuse. And both do happen to our tweens and our teens in friendships or other types of relationships. It could be as much as, why aren't you answering your text messages as soon as I text you? Or I'm not going to do this because you're acting like this. So those are forms of emotional and physical and verbal, abuse. Things that maybe we brush off a little bit, that we don't really think about, that when we're having those open conversations with our kids that we talked about at the beginning, we're like, oh, that's just girls being girls or boys being boys or whatever. And those are red flags. And so that doesn't necessarily mean we have to, or maybe even yellow, right? Flags, we don't have to jump on it right away, but we start watching for that. We start, seeing the patterns, seeing if that's happening more and more. If you're going through your kids' phones, something that I noticed, I went back a little bit and I was like, oh, this is a sign that my kid is, maybe doing some bullying or abuse, and then so then have the conversation with them, and then flip further into the phone and find out that this is a toxic relationship no matter what. It's coming from both ends, and, having that conversation about what toxicity looks like, even in a friendship. So I'm going to focus quickly just on kind of the circle of control. And so some people may hear the phrase quite a bit, well, can you control that? Is that in your control? So there's 3 different circles. There's the circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of concern. And the circle of control, again, is what can we control? So let's be realistic about in our lives, what can we control, right? So if we're looking as parents for our teens, something that we can control is when they're going out, right? Who they're going out with. Yeah, they can have friends, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can go out with their friends if we're getting some of those yellow or red flags, right? And again, having that conversation with them. Other things that we can control, we can control, what they're eating and those kind of things, right? And so things we can't control is how others are responding to our kiddos, right? What other people think about us as parents or about our teens and tweens, right? We can't control those things, but a lot of times, we try and stand up and be like, oh no, this appearance thing, right? I've always got to look like I know what I'm doing or whatever, and we don't have control over the way other people see us. And that's something we need to take through our entire lives for sure. The circle of influence definitely stems back to that peer pressure, those peer pressure conversations. How are our kids being influenced? How are we being influenced by our kids into doing different things for them or not doing things for them? And so where is that influence line? And where do we want that influence line to be? Again, those peer pressure statements, but everybody else is doing it. My friend can, why can't I? A lot of times we respond to influence by thinking our kids are maybe manipulating us or trying to like one up us with the parents or, creating a dynamic of he said, she said. And all of that is definitely within the circle of influence. And then finally, the circle of concern. It's those things that we're kind of holding on to, right? As parents with kids growing up and getting older, we're all going to hold on to some things that, maybe it's from our own experiences when we were kids or things that we're seeing in the media or in our workplace or with our friends' kids, where we're concerned about different things, but we need to hold those tight for us and work proactively instead of reactively to those situations, because that's where our circle of control can come in, right? And so if we're being proactive, if we're anticipating those things that might happen, yes, there's going to be things in life that you're just like, whoa, what happened there, right? That came out of left field. But if you can be intentional and proactive, things will go a lot smoother when you're in power struggles with your teens. And it will also help you have those smoother conversations about the abuse, the possible abuse in a relationship. Whew.
Yes, and that's why, from my end of things, the early childhood end, that's why we beat the connection drum, right? Like, it is, research still does show that children look to their parents or primary caregivers as far as influence goes all the way through. And so the stronger our connection is with them, relationship wise, the more influence they're willing to take from us. And when they get into this stage, that's like you're talking about control, that's pretty much your only mechanism is to be involved. And yeah, And one other thing is the idea of listening to all the little things they say and being open. And I loved what you said about when they talk to you about what their friends do, right? That's like them. I've never thought of that. They're like putting their toe in the water. And that's a good reminder that you can still have important conversations, and it's actually kind of nice because you can be like, oh, well, that sounds like a tough situation for her. Wow, I wonder what she can do about that. I wonder, getting the teen thinking about problem solving without it being focused on them, right? Like the whole, I have a friend who's experiencing these things. And yeah, if you go off, and one thing that I'm quite proud of that we've done in our house is we have the no freak rule. And I've maybe talked about this before, but if they have something they want to tell us and they're worried about getting in trouble, they can say to me, Mom, no freak rule, which means I'm not allowed to freak out. I have to listen. And just a tiny little reminder for me that, the world's not coming to an end and I can listen and not freak out. So yeah.
And taking those opportunities to utilize your support system as a parent as well, right? Whether that be your partner or a parent or a friend or whatnot, and being able to have that conversation with them when you're freaking out, right? You can have that conversation with that support person as you're freaking out, as opposed to with your kid, who definitely will rely on you for kind of all their actions, especially as they're coming into things. So I'm glad there is a takeaway there for you. And I hope that there's takeaways for other people as we continue this conversation on family violence prevention for the month of November.
All right. Well, thank you, Amanda. Thanks everyone for watching. Please remember, if you need additional support or information about what FCSS can do for you, please visit our website, www.fcss.ca. Feel free to reach out to any one of the members of our organization. And yes, so next week, we'll talk a little bit more about family violence awareness and prevention.
Definitely.
Enjoy the rest of this snowy day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.